Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Defined Engagement Bookcast. I'm D.FINED. Today we'll be talking to author Devin Halliday. He wrote the book Belonging Factor: How Great Brands and Great Leaders Inspire Loyalty, Build Community, and Grow Profits. We're going to be talking about Chapter 1 today, and it's called How I Came to Believe in Belonging. Welcome, Devin. Good to see you. Hey, everybody. Good to see you today. I'm here with Devin Halliday, who is the author of this book, Belonging Factor: How Great Brands and Great Leaders Inspire Loyalty, Build Community, and Grow Profits. Devin, thanks for being here with me. And just a little bit, tiny bit about myself. I'm in Augusta. Devin's in Pittsburgh for now. And I run a small consultancy in Augusta which helps organizations with engagement, leader development, employee training. So Devin, thank you for being here. You also have a company. It's called Rudiment Solutions.
Yeah. Similar work, a lot of work around belonging, sense of belonging, and how that translates to productivity, as well as some of the strategic pieces within organizations to help them empower their people to deliver the results that right now they're finding a need to do. So yeah, it's been fantastic to talk to you a little bit already on the intro. I can't wait to talk about get into the meat of the book here with you.
Yeah, we're gonna explore Chapter 1 right now.
Great.
And it is called How I Came to Believe in Belonging. So Devin, how you came to believe in belonging? Well, why don't you just explain that?
It was a journey, like most important things in our life. They happen overnight over the course of about 10 or 15 years, right?
That's beautiful.
So yes, ultimately for me, I grew up with this fascination. Top Gun, the movie Top Gun was like massive. The Blue Angels, the Navy's flight demonstration squadron. Those things were just so impressive to me. And both my grandfathers served in the Navy. I had this idea that that's where I belonged as I was growing up. Mm-hmm. And so what did I do? I enlisted and I went to aviation. And I was working on the same planes that the Blue Angels fly. And I was working on the same planes that Maverick from Top Gun was flying, and living on aircraft carriers and going all over the world. And it was everything that as a child and growing up, it was all of the things, all of the stuff that I said, oh yeah, that's where I belong. Mm-hmm. And I came to realize, and I discuss in much more detail in the book, but I came to realize that maybe the military as a path was not actually the path for me. So aviation and essentially, the race cars of jets and all of these other really cool factors, they're still there and they're still cool, but they were just stuff. They were just things. Mm-hmm. And they were the what, not the why. Yeah. And so ultimately what I really found was that we have to be adaptable and come to understand really kind of purpose and values. And my values and my purpose weren't those that were aligned with being a career military person. That was fine. I had a great time. We did some really important work.
How good a time did you have, Devin?
It was pretty good. It was pretty good. A lot of hard work, I'll tell you that. 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's hard work. And so again, appreciated it, but realized very early on this wasn't necessarily where I belonged. But I started to really have this belief in this idea that as a person, there are values you have. There is a purpose that you might ultimately really be guided to, and that you have to listen and be aware rather than just try to put that square peg into the round hole, which I could have done and probably could have been successful career military, retired right now, all sorts of good stuff. However, that started the journey for me of really believing that there's this true purpose and this true value alignment that you can find with what you do, whether it's for a career, whether it's with your family, etc. And for me, really on the career aspect was where I dig in this book, mm-hmm. and how that affects both leaders and their ability to lead effectively, and employees' ability to really be incredibly engaged and incredibly effective in what they do as a result of the values of an organization and leaders.
Devin, my whole career in OD and HR and things, I used to talk about balancing people and tasks. That mm-hmm. you don't, a leader shouldn't go for very long favoring one over the other, because you're going to lose your people if it's all about task, 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 and you're not going to get anything done if it's all about people, people, people. But you said something pretty provocative in the book in this chapter 1. People matter more than any KPI. Remind us what KPIs are, and then tell me where that was coming from. People matter more, period.
Yeah, OKRs, KPIs, right? It's a key performance indicator.
Yeah.
Essentially metrics and measurements to tell you, are you on track for your ultimate goals of profitability and cost reduction? Right. So, I'll share a very brief version of the story that I tell in the book, but it was my very first civilian leadership role.
Mm-hmm.
And I operated very much similar to how I had learned in the military about how to do leadership, which is you give a command and then the command gets followed, right? Yeah. So
let's do it.
Yes. And I mean, let's be clear. If in the military you have the right people, those people are aligned around the value of compliance with an order.
Mm-hmm.
In the vast majority of Western civilization, Western culture, compliance is not going to be a motivating factor, but motivating towards commitment is ultimately the way to do it. So my very first job, I was all about just, numbers, managed results, managed to the exact specific prescribed actions that I expected to get those results. And I had a mutiny almost on my hands from my team. And fortunately, it was a team that I'd worked with long enough that they came to me about 6 months in and said, "Hey, this isn't working, and we're gonna go, and we're gonna blow this whole thing up if you don't start paying attention and listening to us, some of the ideas we have, some of the feedback we have, giving us real, actionable, tactical discussions that aren't about our numbers." And I took that to heart. Anytime you get feedback like that, where somebody's brave enough, has the courage, has the vulnerability enough to come share that, you have to listen. And as a leader, if you don't, you're not a leader. That's fair and simple. I will tell you, you are not a leader of people if that is the case. You might be a manager of outcomes, but you are not a leader of people. And at that point, I was not a leader of people, but I was starting my first step to really doing that. So that for me opened up this understanding that once I stopped managing my salespeople to the sales goals they had and started talking to them about their life and what they wanted to achieve. I had an employee, Nate. He wanted to go to all these music festivals, which cost money to travel and tickets and all these other things. I had another employee who wanted to buy a boat. Well, then once she bought a boat, she wanted to buy a truck to haul her boat instead of waiting for her friend. And then once she bought the truck, she wanted to also buy a house. Well, what must be true to achieve all those things? You have to have money. And in sales, how do you have money? You exceed your sales quotas. So by starting with the people and really focusing and working on what those people could achieve, wanted to achieve, and working on how they could achieve it, ensuring there was alignment within our organizational goals, we all kind of that rising tide, right? We all lifted. The results lifted for the organization, for my team, and each of the people were achieving the thing they wanted to. The whole purpose they go to work is to be able to achieve their personal goals, essentially, right? Financially, be able to achieve those.
That's a great point.
So that's where I say it's the people are more important than any KPI, because you will never achieve sustained performance success if you do not have a keen eye for helping make sure your people are achieving what they want to, that their value is connected into the organization's output.
Great. I think that speaks to the point where most people don't go to work every day to go say, I'm going to work today so I can meet my company's goals and make them this, and we'll do this for our customers. It usually comes, that might be secondary, but it usually comes to, I go to work each day. And this is the point, I think maybe it's next chapter, but you talk about engagement, but I don't want to go there yet.
Okay.
I'm willing, I would love to ask you before we close, you talk about people genuinely feel they can be vulnerable and authentic, and they're part of a community in which they want to belong. Vulnerability and authenticity is sometimes, it drives me nuts a little bit, because nobody oftentimes is vulnerable, and and authenticity in a business setting, like what does that mean? I guess I'm asking, what does that mean to you? Vulnerability and what authenticity in a business setting, if you're in a business setting.
Great question. So listen, having worked in a Fortune 15 organization for as long as I did, and having interfaced and interacted with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of organizations through consulting work and other pieces, it's very clear that there is always a level of fear that exists in the employee base. In even the best, most well-run, most people-centric organizations, there's still a level of fear of saying or doing something that, or not saying or not doing something that is going to be perceived as ill-fitting for the job, ill-fitting for a promotion, ill-fitting of a raise or meritorious advancement this year. So when you start to really examine that and get under it, in many organizations, that fear comes from unsaid things, unspoken actions, behaviors, or oftentimes just from a bit of a paranoia from past experiences or other experiences that are projected into this environment. And so what that does is it stifles creativity. It stifles the ability to weed out or sort out an issue or problem before it becomes an issue or problem, because somebody doesn't want to raise that objection now for fear of being castigated as a naysayer or as trying to derail a project, when then it gets faced 3 or 6 months down the road or a year down the road, and that person who should have and could have said something to prevent it, they're still keeping their mouth shut because they don't want to go, hey, I knew that back then, but I didn't tell you. So it really creates all these weird silos and dynamics of questioning whether or not somebody's motivations are genuine, etc. When you have an organization where your intention is to create your values, your organizational values, and the behaviors associated with them for all of the folks that work within your organization, you start to create this place where people know what's right and what's wrong. They know that their leaders see it the same way they see it. They know that if they have a limited perspective, that their leaders have a broader perspective, and they offer something that might be off base, their leader will go, hey, I appreciate that suggestion. I'd be happy to share with you, where that might fit into our strategy going forward. I'd be happy to share with you where our strategy is moving, because it sounds like we're a little out of alignment. Versus something along the lines of, Karen, seriously, why are you saying this again? You know what I mean? Like, not that comes up directly like that in most workplaces, but in some it does. Hey, stop. No, I don't want another bad idea from you. There are leaders and bosses who say this to people. Yeah. And so when you really look at that idea, that having that alignment of those values, having that alignment of those principles that allows somebody to trust the environment they're in, they can feel vulnerable. And when somebody feels vulnerable, that means they're willing to speak up on something that will avoid mistakes more than it will cause errors, mistakes, or issues. So they're worried about some sort of retribution or some sort of negative outcome from being vulnerable, either based on past experience or based on just a projection in the workforce. When in reality, you have to intentionally, deliberately, and regularly, consistently create an environment where vulnerability is and authenticity are absolutely expected and rewarded with patience, with conversation, and with in kind return of vulnerability. Leaders who express vulnerability genuinely have a stronger, longer, and more supportive base of employees than those who don't. And they also get that vulnerability from their team, which is invaluable as a leader, where information is what you trade in every day to make your decisions.
Super way to explain it, yeah. Hey, would you be willing to, what I'm hearing, Devin, is this concept of psychological safety on the job.
Certainly.
Basically, you could, if you feel safe, you can be vulnerable and you can be more authentic, be yourself. I would love an example, if you're willing, just to tell me, like when you were a pretty high-level manager at Verizon in your past, and can you give an example of when you were vulnerable to your people?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I would say that early on, although I didn't see it at the time, that example I shared with you where I was willing to listen to and kind of
Yes.
receive that feedback. But there's an exercise that I always have done with teams once we're about a year in to working with a group of folks. And so I'll do what I call a plus delta exercise. I learned it from somebody, not sure who. But I'll do a plus delta exercise where I will take a couple of the people on my team and we'll get a team meeting together. And I'll take a couple people on my team and ask them to just kind of lead this exercise. And I leave. And the exercise is list all of the things that for me as a leader are helpful for you, work for you, that you want me to keep doing. That's the plus side. On the delta side, list all of those things that you feel like are either hindering you in your ability to do your job, or something that you wish you had more of that you're not getting enough of, or something you wish I would stop that I may not realize is something that's impacting you. And it's kind of a group consensus list.
Yeah.
And they have a person to just kind of write all this stuff down, and then they speak as a group. So no one person, unless they feel like identifying themselves as the person who selected that item, no one person is singled out for anything. And then I come back in the room and they share all this with me and break it down for me. And then I make a commitment at that point. The question goes like this: what are the top 2 things that must happen now on the Delta list?
Yes.
Or else we derail quickly. And I make a commitment that those are the first things that change. I never make excuses for anything. To explain why it is. Some of the things that go up on the Delta list are things that I can't change. They're out of my control. And that's not the forum to give that feedback. That's the forum to say, let me take that back and circle back with you on exactly what we can do. And then of course, that's where I can follow back up and say, yeah, so this one is a little out of my control, but what's in our control is X, Y, Z. So why don't we work on this together? That's, I would say, the tool that I've used most consistently about a year in, once there's enough trust built and enough feedback that's exchanged back and forth over that time to be very vulnerable and willing to take the criticism and feedback. The other thing I've always done is invite, in any public setting, any critical feedback. I don't have any problems with critical feedback in public, particularly if it's something that leads to a good discussion that allows for better outcomes to come as a result of it.
Well, that's a great example that you gave, and not just great, but brave. And you won't see it that way necessarily, that you're brave, but I think that very few leaders go that way. That they just I would do a little survey. It was kind of a pre-printed. Somebody else streamed up the survey, but I would ask them to do it anonymously and that kind of thing. And they would be, most times they would be very frank with me, but I kind of was anonymous. But I love what you're recommending here. And do you recommend that other bosses do that?
I do recommend that folks do it. Actually, it is an exercise that is in a piece of material that is available if you purchase the book, and you get access to all of these really cool exercises and tools and worksheets and meeting agenda ideas. There's a ton of resources once you purchase the book to help with your endeavor as a leader, and this is definitely one of them. I recommend it. I've given the feedback to many folks who've been part of my teams over the years, and they've done it, and always given great feedback on the results of it. They've also said it's one of the toughest things they've ever done.
Ooh, baby. Hey, I want to again recommend this book, Belonging Factor by Devin Halliday. It's how great brands and great leaders inspire loyalty, build community, and grow profits. Devin, thank you for discussing chapter 1 with me, and I look forward to talking about chapter 2 with you very soon. So enjoy your day, and we'll see you down the road.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Devin Halliday, for being with me today for chapter 1. Next time it's going to be chapter 2 of Belonging Factor, and that's the importance of belonging. If you'd like to see more bookcasts, go to this site, Anchor FM, D.FINED. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Defined Engagement Bookcast.